Hey everyone, welcome back. We're diving into some pretty heavy stuff today. We've been getting a ton of questions about the recent changes in U.S. immigration and what it all means, especially for those of you out there with Korean backgrounds. Green card holders, visa holders. It seems like there's a lot of confusion and, honestly, a good bit of fear, and rightfully so. You sent over a really interesting article from a Korean language source, and, well, let's just say it doesn't exactly paint a rosy picture.
Yeah, the source is pretty alarming. The thing that really jumps out is how it emphasizes the risk of deportation. Even for people who are legally residing in the U.S., we're talking green card holders, folks on visas. They're not just talking about possibilities either.
Right.
They actually mention a specific number. A staggering 1.1 million Korean green card and visa holders who could be affected by these changes. And it's not just hypothetical. This is already happening. There are real cases of deportation underway.
1.1 million. That's a huge number. It really hits home when you see the scale of it like that. But the source doesn't just stop at the numbers. It dives into the why. Why are these deportations happening? And that's where things get a little, well, unsettling.
Exactly. The source claims that many of these deportations, even those targeting legal residents, are being justified as a way to combat this, quote, anti-American sentiment.
Okay, so that phrase anti-American sentiment is pretty broad. What does it actually mean in this context? Like, how are they defining it?
Well, it seems to be a bit of a catch-all term. They're using it to justify deporting people who have expressed views critical of the U.S. government, its policies. And from what the source says, this anti-American sentiment can include a surprisingly wide range of actions and expressions.
So what kind of actions are we talking about here? I mean, could simply speaking your mind get you deported?
That's the scary part. The source highlights this case of a Columbia University graduate student, a Palestinian national. He was arrested for protesting the killing of Palestinians by Israeli soldiers. And get this, his support for Palestine was categorized by the U.S. government as support for Hamas, a designated terrorist organization.
Hold on. So even though he is protesting a human rights issue, they're saying his actions were a threat to national security.
Yep, and because of that, he's facing deportation. And this is despite the fact that he has a U.S. citizen wife and an 8-month-old child. I mean, this case really shows how subjective these classifications can be. Even advocating for human rights can be misconstrued as a threat.
It's a chilling example.
Yeah.
And what's even more concerning is what the source says about protests. They argue that simply being present at a protest could be enough to raise red flags, enough to lead to deportation.
Right. They draw a parallel to the January 6th Capitol riot. You know how they used footage from that day to identify and arrest participants.
Yeah.
It's not a stretch to think that they could use those same tactics against immigrants at any protest, regardless of whether they were actually involved in anything illegal.
It's a scary thought. Being caught in a deportation dragnet just for exercising your right to assemble. And that leads us to another area where the source, raises some serious concerns. Social media surveillance.
Oh, absolutely. The source reveals that all social media is being monitored now, even Korean platforms like KakaoTalk. And it goes beyond looking for criminal activity. They're flagging content that expresses what they're calling anti-U.S. sentiment.
Okay, so anti-U.S. sentiment. Give us some concrete examples. What exactly are we talking about here?
Well, direct threats, hate speech, those are obvious. But it's not limited to that.
Right.
They list things like making threats or insults toward the president, even casual ones, as potential red flags.
Wait, so you're saying even a joke about the president, something sarcastic, could get someone in trouble?
Potentially, yeah. They also mentioned expressing a preference for living in another country, like saying, you miss Korea or something. That could raise eyebrows.
So if someone says, I miss my family in Korea, or they're looking forward to a visit, that could be held against them.
That's what the source seems to be suggesting. Any indication of dissatisfaction with life in the U.S., no matter how small, it could be interpreted negatively. And get this, discrepancies between your online persona and the details you provided on your visa application, stuff like your marital status, that can also trigger suspicion.
You mean if you say you're single on your application, but then you post pictures with your partner on social media, that could be a problem?
Apparently so. And even deleting content, trying to hide information, it's likely pointless. They're using AI, powerful AI, to search across platforms, dig up anything that might be incriminating.
It's getting a little Orwellian, isn't it? They're using AI to analyze your entire online history, even if you try to erase stuff.
Seems that way. It creates this feeling that you're always being watched. Every online action, every post, every comment could be scrutinized, used against you.
Okay, so online activity is a minefield. But what about traveling back to Korea? I mean, you'd think that would be a basic right for green card holders, visiting family, their home country. But it sounds like even that's risky these days.
The source is pretty clear on that. There's no guaranteed safe length of time for a trip back to Korea. Even a few months could trigger suspicion. And they really emphasize that Customs and Border Protection, CBP, they have a lot of discretion in these matters.
So even if you're just visiting family or attending a wedding, there's a chance you could be flagged upon your return? Just like that.
That's the point they're making. They describe this case of a Korean green card holder detained and questioned by CBP after a 3-month trip to Korea. They hadn't done anything wrong, but it just goes to show how unpredictable and how much power these CBP officers have at the border. And here's the real kicker. Even having a re-entry permit doesn't guarantee you anything anymore.
Wait, are you serious? Even if you've done everything by the book, gotten all the right paperwork, you could still be denied entry.
That's what the source is saying. A re-entry permit just allows you to apply for re-entry. The final decision rests with CBP.
So what's behind all of this? This increased scrutiny, the aggressive enforcement.
The source suggests that immigration officials, CBP, ICE, they're under a lot of pressure to increase deportations. It's leading to these aggressive and sometimes questionable tactics.
It sounds like they're being pushed to look tough on immigration, even if it means going after people who don't pose any real threat.
That's the disturbing implication here. And this pressure is leading to some pretty messed up practices. The source specifically warns about the I-407 form, this document that can have serious consequences for green card holders.
This I-407 form, it sounds like a real trap. What exactly is it, and how are they using it against green card holders?
It's basically a document, and it forces you to waive your green card rights.
So if you sign it, you're giving up your legal status in the U.S., just like that.
Exactly. And the really scary part is how they're using it. The source talks about these situations at the border where CBP officers are pressuring travelers to sign. They say it's the only way to avoid immediate deportation, a 10-year ban from the U.S.
So you're in this really stressful situation at the border, you're scared, you don't know what to do, you might feel like you have no choice but to sign away your rights, even if you don't fully understand what you're doing.
Right. And it's so messed up because it preys on people's fear. They don't know their legal rights, and they're just trying to get back home.
It's awful.
Yeah.
Families being torn apart because someone felt forced to sign something they didn't understand. And it's not just this I-407. There are other things people need to be aware of, right? Other deportation risks. What are some of the big ones?
Well, some are pretty clear-cut. Like lying on your visa application, obviously that's a no-go. Marrying just to get a green card, that's another one. And if you get detained for over a year, including probation, for any crime, that can put you at risk too.
Yeah, those make sense. But then there's all this other stuff. Social media posts, the length of your trips back home. It seems so vague, so hard to know what's okay and what's not.
It creates this atmosphere of fear. Even if you think you're following the rules, you never really know. The line keeps shifting.
And it all comes back to this pressure on immigration officials, right?
Yeah.
They're being pushed to deport more people.
Yeah.
And that's leading to these really aggressive tactics.
That's exactly what the source is saying. It's like they're trying to make deportation as easy as possible, even if it means bending the rules or using intimidation.
Speaking of bending the rules, the source mentions vandalism, and they connect it to terrorism.
Yeah.
It seemed like a strange jump. Can you unpack that a little?
Yeah, it's about this rise in vandalism against Tesla cars. And then they bring up Trump's statement about treating that kind of vandalism as terrorism.
I remember that. It seemed like an odd thing to focus on. What's the connection to immigration? Why does the source even mention it?
It's all about how they're defining terrorism. They're expanding the definition to include things that wouldn't normally be considered terrorism, like vandalism.
So you're saying someone who damages a Tesla could face the same consequences as someone who commits a violent act.
That's what they're implying. And while that specific thing about Tesla vandalism isn't a law, it shows this dangerous trend. They're stretching the definition of terrorism to include things that are, well, just not terrorism.
It's like they're trying to create this climate of fear where anything you do, even something as minor as messing with a car, could be labeled terrorism and used to deport you.
The source seems to be arguing that this expanded definition is being used to target certain groups, particularly immigrants who disagree with the government.
So even just venting your frustrations online or going to a protest could be twisted into a terrorism charge.
That's a real possibility. It paints a pretty disturbing picture. Even legal residents are living in fear, censoring themselves. They're afraid to speak their minds or do anything that might draw attention.
It's like Big Brother is watching. But it's not just one person. It's algorithms, surveillance systems, immigration officials with all this power. It's a lot to take in. It's no wonder our listeners are feeling overwhelmed.
Absolutely. The source is exposing some really scary truths about immigration in the U.S., but it's important to remember that knowledge is power.
I agree. The more you understand the risks, how this system works, the better equipped you are to make informed decisions.
Right. You might need to be extra careful about what you post online. Make sure you're documenting your travel. You might even want to talk to an immigration lawyer to get some advice.
And remember, you're not alone in this. 1.1 million Korean green card and visa holders could be affected by these changes. That's a lot of people going through the same things, facing the same anxieties.
Exactly. Connect with others, share information, support each other. There's strength in numbers.
And things can change. Laws and policies can evolve. Public awareness, people speaking out, that can make a difference. It's not time to give up. It's time to get involved.
Stay informed, stay connected, and don't be silent. Your voice matters. Talk to your elected officials. Support organizations that are fighting for immigrant rights.
We've reached the end of this deep dive, but the conversation doesn't end here. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and find ways to make a difference.
And we're here to help you make sense of it all.
Thanks for joining us. Until next time, keep diving deep. All right, we're back for the final part of our deep dive into U.S. immigration. You know, what all this means for Korean green card holders, we've uncovered some pretty heavy stuff. And judging from the messages you've been sending in, it's clear this is hitting close to home for a lot of you.
It's understandable. This is some serious stuff. And
Yeah.
one thing we're seeing over and over in the listener feedback is this feeling of, well, uncertainty, vulnerability.
Yeah.
Like one listener wrote, I've always played by the rules, paid my taxes, volunteered in my community. My kids were even born here. But now I'm terrified to even visit my family in Korea. I'm afraid they won't let me back in.
Yeah, it's like you did everything right, and now the rules have changed, and you don't know what to do.
It's a really unsettling feeling. Another listener shared that they're starting to feel like a guest in their own home. You know, always looking over their shoulder, thinking twice about everything they post online.
It's like this place where you've built a life. It doesn't feel like home anymore.
And a lot of listeners are worried about what this means for their kids, for future generations. Will they ever truly feel like they belong here if even their parents, people with green cards, are being targeted, made to feel unwelcome?
It's a big question. It goes beyond just the individual anxieties, right? It's about what kind of society are we creating? What values do we want to uphold? So where do we go from here? What can people do when faced with all this uncertainty?
Well, the first step is awareness. And I think through this deep dive, we've achieved that. By understanding the risks, how these policies are enforced, well, it gives you a starting point.
Knowledge is power, as they say. And even if the rules seem unfair or confusing, the more you know, the better decisions you can make.
Exactly. So maybe that means being more careful about what you share online, or keeping really good records of your travels, or even talking to an immigration lawyer, just to get some personalized advice.
And don't forget, you're not alone in this. Remember that number, 1.1 million. That's a lot of people who could be affected. It's a whole community.
And there's power in that. Connect with each other, share information, support each other. There's strength in numbers.
And remember, things can change. Policies evolve. And when people speak out, when they get involved, that can make a difference.
So stay informed, stay connected, and most importantly, speak up. Your voice matters. Reach out to your elected officials, support those organizations fighting for immigrant rights.
We've come to the end of our deep dive. But this is just the beginning, really. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and find ways to get involved.
We're here to support you along the way.
Thanks for joining us. Until next time, keep diving deep.